In the early afternoon, the summer sunlight glints on the calm glass-like surface of the Gare Loch, casting a gentle glow over the water. By the serene loch side, the gentle hum of bees and other insects fills the air, a soft rhythmic backdrop to the occasional sharp calls of the gulls overhead. Nature's symphony unfolds quietly, each sound weaving together into a calming, joyful melody that invites you to pause and listen. A peaceful scene with a dreamlike quality, as if viewed from a timeless garden untouched by change. I'd come to this quiet corner of Rue to service a washing machine, enjoying the respite from the busy schedule of my daily routine. Little did I know I was about to encounter a piece of living history. In a quiet village, Rue's shoreline runs into Gare Loch on the west coast of Scotland, near the town of Helensburgh. It is small. Its inhabitants, a mixture of retired residents and families who had lived there for generations, sharing their peaceful lives with naval personnel from the Faslane submarine base who had brought with them young families full of life and vitality. The rhythm of life was slow, dictated by the changing seasons and the chimes of the old church clock. It was a place where stories lingered, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. On this afternoon, as I drove through Helensburgh, enjoying the warm summer sunshine of mid-afternoon, my mind on my next service repair, I was running ahead of schedule. It had been a day of uncomplicated calls, nothing taxing, and I was on course to finish early. As I drove up a narrow lane past cottages with well-tended gardens adorned with blooming roses, I was hoping this, my second-to-last call of the day, would be another routine visit, setting me up for my next and final visit, only a few miles away in the smaller village of Shandon, with its beautiful view over the loch towards Roseneath. The air was filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the murmur of distant gentle wash of waves on the shoreline. It was one of those long, hot summer days, which are not very common in Scotland's often wet and dreary west coast. I was soaking up every minute of it. It was as if time itself had slowed down in this idyllic setting. As I entered the garden, I noticed a solitary figure sitting on a bench outside the whitewashed cottage, peacefully enjoying the warm summer day, and his view from his bench overlooking the waters, where you can sometimes see a returning or leaving submarine, or even the occasional frigate. The elderly man sitting quietly on the bench, his eyes closed, listening to the sound of nature, appearing completely at peace with the world. His face, etched with the passage of time, held a look of quiet contentment as he sat still, wearing his black trousers and black shirt with its distinctive white dog collar. Beside him, hanging over the back of the bench, was his black jacket. He was a minister for one of the local churches. I parked my service van, collected my tool bag, and walked over to him. He was now sitting alert with a gentle smile on his face. "Good afternoon," I said, and introduced myself even though he was expecting me. He looked up, his blue eyes, though faded with age, still held a youthful spark. "Good afternoon to you too, young man," he replied, his voice surprisingly strong as he stood up. He stood tall and straight, white-haired, as yet unbowed by his age. Following him into the cottage and through into his kitchen, I listened carefully as he told me about the problem with his washing machine. I found the customer knows exactly what the problem is. Even if they don't realize it, they are familiar with the sounds and operation of the equipment. They always pick up on something wrong. This makes my life so much easier. I could narrow down the problem very quickly from their insight. As is normal, we chatted, making conversation while I repaired his machine. This was a part of the job I enjoyed, that and the cups of coffee and biscuits I consumed at nearly every home. No wonder I was putting on weight. I couldn't help but notice the large oil painting showing him some 20 years younger. In this painting, he was wearing a graduation gown and mortarboard with the tassel hanging over one side of his face, though what attracted me most was the row of medals pinned to his chest. They hinted at a past far from the tranquility of this sleepy village and his role as a country minister. My curiosity roused, I asked him about the medals. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, a mixture of pride and pain. "Oh, those," he said, his voice softening. "They're just a reminder of another life, a long, long time ago." He paused, lost in thought, looking towards the oil painting hanging on the wall. He confirmed it was a portrait of him graduating as a minister late on in life. His face in the painting, although much younger, was not so changed to the old man before me. "Yes, it's me," he said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. The painting depicted a younger man still in his 50s, possibly his 60s. He had obviously come to the ministry much later in his life, the graduation gown in stark contrast to the medals he wore in his graduation portrait. His eyes, though filled with a confidence, held a depth that spoke of experiences beyond his years. "I served in the Royal Naval Air Service during the Great War. It was 1917 and I was a pilot at 21 years old," he said, his voice filled with a quiet dignity. He spoke of his service with a humility that was both humbling and inspiring. He didn't boast of heroics or dwell on the horrors he must have witnessed. Instead, he spoke of his comrades, the young men who had known close friends and comrades alongside him, many of whom never returned home. He spoke of their courage, their camaraderie, their shared sense of duty in the face of unimaginable adversity. He had been just a boy when the war broke out, barely old enough to shave. The son of a hard-working local, he had dreamt of a life filled with the sunshine days of youth ahead of him, never even suspecting what fate had in store for him and his generation. Not flying isolated and alone, in the skies hunting submarines above that cold and unforgiving North Sea. But duty called, and he answered, just like countless others of his generation. He trained as a pilot, mastering the art of flying those fragile biplanes, their canvas wings held together by hope and prayers. He spoke of the thrill of flight, the freedom of soaring above the clouds, even amidst the constant danger. His missions were fraught with peril, with no means of communication with base, flying out over those often stormy and wild North Sea waves, using only primitive instruments by today's standards. He said of the North Sea, it was often called a shallow, vicious sea by those who sailed it. His task was simple: seek and destroy German submarines in the surface before they could dive, each flight a dance with death. These were frail biplanes with awkward-looking floats for takeoff and landing on the water. He spoke of the fear, the adrenaline, the ever-present knowledge that each mission could be his last. He also spoke of being out there, somewhere over the sea, isolated from home, alert to the waters below while scanning the skies around him, aware he might not be alone, looking for telltale signs of anything which could lead him to a submarine. I wanted to ask him about his experiences in combat, about the things he had seen, the things he must have done, but something in his demeanor, a quiet reserve, held me back. It was as if some memories were too painful to unearth, some stories too heavy to tell. He spoke of his service with a quiet stoicism, his words measured, his emotions hidden. He talked of the primitive bombing equipment, not the fancy release mechanisms and bomb sights fitted to the bombers of the Second World War. He spoke of his duty, his comrades, and how when a submarine was found on the surface, the task was simple: fly over it while hanging out of the cockpit with a bomb in his hand, waiting for the right moment before dropping it onto the submarine below. But never of his own bravery. He never said whether he had destroyed any submarines. I think he would never talk about it if he had. Possibly it was something deep in his character and his reason for turning to the ministry. Nor about any of the horrors he must have witnessed. I realized that some stories are not meant to be told, some wounds too deep to be reopened. The weight of his experiences, the things he had seen and done, remained locked away behind his stoic facade, part of a burden he carried with quiet dignity. As he finished his tale, or as much as he would share with me, a stranger, I completed my paperwork and stowed my tools in my tool bag, thanking him before heading to my van. My task completed, it was on to my next appointment. I still had one more service call to complete before my day was over. I thanked him for his time, the cups of coffee with the obligatory biscuits, and most important, for sharing his experiences with me. He smiled, a sad but knowing smile. It was my duty, he said simply, just like it was the duty of all those who answered the call, many never to return. He looked at me, his blue eyes filled with a lifetime of memories. Never forget that. Never forget the sacrifices that were made. As I walked to my van, my mind racing, my heart filled with a mixture of awe and sadness. Awe at the courage and sacrifice of this quiet hero, sadness at the thought of all the untold stories, the memories carried by an entire generation who had fought and died in a war that had faded into the history books. As I left the village, the image of the old minister sitting on that bench stayed with me. He was a living reminder of a time when ordinary men and women were called upon to do extraordinary things, to fight for their country, for their beliefs, for a world free from tyranny. His story, like the stories of countless other ordinary people who obeyed and still do obey the call to defend their country and its people, was a testament to the human spirit, its capacity for courage, for resilience, for sacrifice. Their stories deserve to be heard, their sacrifices remembered, not just on Remembrance Sunday, but every day. We must never forget the lessons learned, the sacrifices made. We owe it to them, the heroes of the Great War, and to all those who have served and continue to serve, those who stand between the light and the darkness to strive for a world where peace prevails and the horrors of war are never repeated.